yeah. This is my kayak. Get yourself one. Fish on! Yeah! Oh my God! Look at that tank! That's a tow, brother. Golly! All right, so before we jump into today's walkthrough, I want to invite my good friend, Mr. Jameson Redding, in. He's basically going to assist me in this walkthrough because Jameson is not only the brand manager of Jackson Kayak, but he's also kind of the brains behind this new Coosa X. So first and foremost, Jameson, before we jump into it, give us a little bit of an overview of like, what was the thought process behind the Coosa X, you know, and basically where do you see it fitting in an angler's arsenal?
Yeah, so I can't really take credit for being the brains behind it because if you take a look at the logo, it's a Team JK signature boat, which means that when we decided to do this boat or do an update on the Coosa line, we put together a group of our team that river fishes that would have that insight into what they would like to see different or changed or how they fish out of a boat when they're in moving water specifically. And then we just took all that information, put it together, and worked with the R&D team to execute that plan. So it really was a group effort, and if I did anything, it was just help connect those dots. But as far as what we wanted to do was have a boat that could handle moving water, could handle the challenges of going through some riffles and some rapids even, could be maneuverable, super stable, so the person that maybe doesn't have a whole lot of experience in that scenario would feel confident in this boat and stay dry and just, you know, be able to even stand and fish in and around moving water. So a lot of that was the focus. So that's who it's for, really.
Yeah, so it's got good rocker in it, but it's also got enough, if you see here how the boat rocks back and forth, it's got enough, you know, gap between initial stability and secondary stability. You can still edge it and turn it like you're going to want to do with the riverboat. So Jameson, what we're going to do is just jump up to the front. So guys, before we started filming, one of the things that Jameson talked about was the fact that the boat has the ability to through line your anchor wizard on both sides. Now, it doesn't come rigged with it, but it took us all of about 10 minutes to drill a hole and run a little short piece of tubing through there. And one of the things that I've been wanting to experiment with for a long time is to go to this thinner Dacron cord. So I outfitted the anchor wizard for this boat with a thinner Dacron cord. Got this small anchor. It'll work great with this anchor. It'll work great with the anchor that actually comes from Anchor Wizard, the bomb, you know, or the anchor you make up yourself. And so we just put this like Yak Attack ball on there as a guide for now. I love the Anchor Wizard setup, but I've never really been a fan of that chute because it like rocks back and forth and it clanks and it makes a bunch of noise, and I just wanted it a cleaner, lower profile. We may end up going to a guide ring or something right here just in case when the boat turns, this doesn't naturally, you know, find its way back. But for now, this is what I think we're gonna play with and see how it works. Coming on back, it's pretty cool that they went to the, you know, additional link to add security bars into the boat, which gives you plenty of room to feed a strap under there, not just a bungee cord. What's awesome about that is there is some great internal storage, big Tankwell, a lot of underseat storage. But if you're gonna do a river fishing trip and you're gonna do those overnighters and things like that, it really gives you the ability to strap down some bigger packs or tents or gear, you know, on top of there. Or at least that's my understanding of what the purpose of these kind of security bars are set up for. Also a great place to run a security cable or something like that too if you want to lock up your hatch so people can't get inside the boat. In true Jackson fashion, you've got the big wiper knobs that open up, solid, you know, connection in the front, and just a really big oversized hatch. I like the fact that in this riverboat that the lip comes up and then there's a gasket on the inside. What that's going to do is when you punch through waves and that water comes up over the top and it goes through these channels that actually run the water, not only vacating the cockpit but actually steering it away from the cockpit, is just going to keep that inside of the boat super dry, but it's going to help vacate that water, you know, a lot faster. And again, it's easy one-handed operation with those big thumb swiper knobs. You've got your standard paddle park up out here made out of rubber with the JK branding in it. So if you're standing and fishing or if you're quick fishing, it gives you a real easy way to just shove your paddle in there.
And this is new actually material for 2023 on this boat. Was the first boat that we came out, but all of our paddle straps have been swapped over to it. We had the old Hypalon, which was like snag free, but over time it would fade and the JK logo would fade off of it. So this was an update on that.
And one of the things that I also like about it is it's through bolted with nuts on the back side of it. So you're gonna get that rubber that's gonna grab the paddle, and there's some texture on the back of it, but it's also through bolted. So you're not just gonna rip that thing out of there if you happen to accidentally grab your paddle or catch it on something like it did with a lot of the older materials. Again, another security bar right here. You got the classic Jackson stand assist strap. I think for big dudes like me, this is really more of a sit assist strap than it is a stand up strap. I have no problem just popping right up, but a lot of times when you're sitting down, you want the security of having that little additional strap. All right, so one of the first things you encounter when you move into the cockpit is that there's rod tubes built in so that you can store your rods and use it with Jackson's rod stagers. But one cool thing about this boat, especially with this oversized hatch, and one of the first questions I asked Jameson was, can you store rods internally? That was probably my biggest gripe with the Coosa HD. I'm a river fisherman, and a lot of times to get to rivers, you got to drag through the woods to either get to the water or get out of the water. So being able to throw all your stuff inside the boat and then drag to the water and then set up is huge. But now that these rod tubes are kind of built in and everything's tucked in, you can probably just use it right there. But having the ability to throw your rods on the inside, run a security cable across there and lock it up even helps you with a little bit of peace of mind for tournament fishing. So I think that's a huge improvement. Now, I was a little bit kind of taken back when I first saw these new style foot braces because they're kind of in. But after sitting down at the boat when we were just ground checking it, it's way more comfortable than I thought it was. So a lot of people when they first look at this are going to be like, man, I can't get my legs that close together, you know, because I'm a man. That's not something you really have to worry about, because what you probably end up doing is kind of putting your heel out here and just catching like the outside edge of it. They're also really easy to remove. Now, one thing that I can tell you that I'm probably going to do right out of the gate is they come with these wiper style knobs to screw the foot braces down. Yak Attack makes one that's more of a flat profile that nothing can get caught behind. So I'll probably, honestly, Jameson, because I have a ton of this stuff and because they're really inexpensive, just take all these knobs out and switch them out for the Yak Attack ones that have a bigger surface area, so they're easier to adjust and tighten down, but they also don't catch fly line or you know, anything like that. So little simple upgrade that you could make. But what you really see when you see this boat right out of the gate is a big open cockpit, you know, not a lot of stuff to get in your way, something you really want, you know, for kayak fishing and especially for river fishing. To be honest with you guys, other than a black pack, probably one of the only accessories that I'll put on this boat is the anchor wizard, which I've already done. And I generally put my anchor wizard a little further forward than most people because one, I've got these long monkey arms. Two, I really like to put the anchor wizard down, standing up, going around through an eddy, spinning around to fish a spot. I like to be able to just reach down. And if I have it in the back, you pretty much got to sit down and then reach back and do it. So I just always like to have my anchor wizard a little bit further forward. So that's pretty much where I'm going to set mine up until I go out fishing and it proves that it's not where I want it to be. But the great thing about the tri-track is that you can mount that thing anywhere that you really want it to, up and down the track, on both sides. You know, there's really also the option that potentially you could move the anchor wizard to the outside, run your line out of the top hole, and then you could crank it the other way. So the tri-track is really one of the more versatile track series out there. I don't think anybody else in the industry has this type of setup where you can mount stuff on the inside, the top, and the outside. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the rod stagers. Now, the next thing you notice is there's this big, large, really sturdy looking frame seat because it's all metal. There's not a whole lot, you know, initially, the first thing that I thought was with this bar going across there, it might cut into the back of your legs. But let's be real. In this day and age, if you're not using a kayak cushion, you're probably wrong. You should just get yourself a kayak cushion, so that's not going to be that big of an issue. But I really like the fact that this thing is just solid. Like it's a solid frame. And then in true Jackson fashion, the high to low seat conversion, super simple. But you've also now got the ability to loosen these thumb screws up and slide the boat back and forth to trim it out. So if you've got a bow mounted trolling motor, if you've got a stern mounted motor, if you got power pole, whatever weight you've got on the boat, you've got the ability to now trim out the load.
Yeah, and it also affects tracking a lot. Like even if you don't have, you know, you're trying to trim the weight, just trimming the boat and getting that rocker profile. Like you trim further back, you raise the bow, the boat now will spin like super easy. You get to a flatter section of water and you want to paddle and track better, you move the seat a little bit forward, get the boat to flatten out in the water, and it's going to track straighter, which gives you more speed. And people don't realize how big of a difference that little bit, I mean, a couple inches moving 220 pounds in a boat is going to make a huge difference in that.
You know, one of the better analogies that I can come up with that might be universal to people is everybody growing up probably stood on a skateboard at one point in their life. If you put your weight on the back foot, you can move the nose around a lot easier. Kind of the same thing in a kayak. The more you move back, the more you dig the back end in, the more you loosen up the nose, and the more you push forward, the more you dig the nose in. So you're going to get a little bit more speed, you're going to get less maneuverability and better tracking. And then the further you move back, because it doesn't have a super deep keel, the more you're going to loosen that nose up and give yourself a lot more maneuverability. Not to mention the fact that you're running whitewater, you punch through a class 2, a class 3, probably wouldn't go class 4 for all you knuckleheads out there that think you can. You punch through that class 3 and you spin around. You don't want to have to adjust your seat to pop up and be able to fish an eddy. So the further back you are, the more cockpit you've got and the more ability you have to pop up into the standing position and fish on the river. But then again, having that high to low position being something that's very easy to do also means you can do it. If you're not real comfortable in the high position and you're about to run a rapid, you don't have to like pull over to the bank, get out of the boat to move the seat around. You basically just pop it up and slide it down. You want to go to the high position, you're standing up, you just pop it back up and lock. So really they should name this the pop and lock seat, because that's all you got to do is just drop it down, pop it up and lock it. And so probably the easiest that I've seen in the industry to go from high to low, and I think this is new. Is this a new configuration for
So
Jackson?
last year was the first year we launched the new easy high-low seat slider system is the name for
or
it.
as I like to call it, the pop and lock.
Pop and lock's better, I think. We should probably think about that.
Before we get out of the cockpit, another really cool thing that they did with this boat, and we'll take a look at the other side of it when we flip it over to talk about the hull, is there's pad eyes going down the center. And the idea behind that, if I understand correctly, is that that allows you to run your cords from your power source to your electronics and run it underneath there so that the cordage is secure. So talk to us a little bit about that, like before we even get to the bottom of the boat. Talk to us about the idea behind that channel down the middle.
So all of our fishing kayaks at Jackson have the transducer scupper. In this boat, it's actually underneath the seat. That just made the most sense for getting it tucked into the hull of the boat, protected. We have a cover underneath there that we can take a look at later. But then you got your transducer cable coming through the scupper, and you got to figure out how to get it inside the boat or to your battery or whatever. And so that was the idea. If you want to run it, down the middle here, you can take these pad eyes out. You just unscrew them with a Phillips head screwdriver, and then you can put your cable under and secure them back down, and then jump into the hole through a pass-through, or you can go to the back of the boat to a battery box. Whatever it is, it just keeps things tucked in nice so you don't have stuff laying on top of the boat.
Yeah, so you could literally easily build a double mount right here. You could put a Yak Attack mount and put your graph head unit right there, run your cord, to the back to your Dakota Lithium power, or you could run it inside the cockpit, like you said, with like a Yak Attack pass-through or something like that. But it just gives you a lot of options. And we'll take a closer look at that once we flip the boat over to take a look at the hull. One of the things that I felt was the coolest in this whole design and was looking forward to checking out is the rod stagers. What's the actual trade name for this from Jackson?
Those are the tri-lock stagers.
So the tri-lock stagers, they got this really cool, like, just pull up and unlock little bungee cord right here, which is easy to do. It's got like a little cut on one side so your finger gets a little bit of grip or traction. And then the rods just stick right into the tube and then they slide in. I feel like the bottom one is probably borderline unusable. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think you can adjust this up and down height-wise. Essentially, we designed this to work on the NAR, and the NAR has 3 tubes, so you can access all 3. The NAR is also a little bit wider than this boat, so you have a little more room here. But these aren't cheap to make, so we've kind of dual-purposed it here, and you've got 2 rod tubes up here, and you could double up and actually run 3. And if you did want to raise this up, you just adjust this clip here, and you can raise this up, and then your lower one is higher, so you could actually access it there. But just depending on how you want it set and what you have in your hand there, you can kind of go through that. But essentially, we came up with a system using what we call a quick clip, and this is an L bracket adapter. And then all of our accessories that we've come out with that are track mountable, like this rod stager, can be moved around anywhere on the boat, meaning it can be mounted to the inside of your tri-track the way it is here, or using this adapter, if you've got flat track and you want to mount it to the top or to flat track, you can use this adapter and actually move this back further on the boat if you want longer rods, or even into the Tankwell if you want fly rods.
And in theory, you could just turn this thing around
and put it on the outside.
Your stager on the outside and put 2 of them. Now you could have all your rods on the outside. Probably not a good idea if you're paddling, but if you're motorized and you're going upstream and you're not going to encounter any really aggressive water, just another cool configuration thing. Now, one thing that Jameson explained to me before is that you don't necessarily have to have this L bracket, because you can take these T-bolts, go through this direction, and actually mount these clips right to the outside of the track. So now it's a little bit cleaner profile. But if you want to have that versatility and mobility. Again, take this thing, move it to the back, take your stager, move it to the back, and now you can put a 9-foot plus fly rod where your reel is sitting in the Tankwell, and you've got the tip of your really expensive fly rod protected. So the versatility of this thing is pretty crazy. The ability to have a wide open cockpit but still have the rod stagers, built into it is pretty slick. Now, one thing I do want to talk about before we move back is this boat has the ability to be motorized, and motorizing river kayaks is becoming more and more popular because fishing upstream, in my opinion, is a lot more effective than fishing downstream, because you're not spooking the fish before you get to them. You can ease up, you're not blowing past them and then trying to come around. You blow past a really wary, big, female river smallie, she knows you're there. You spin back around, try to fish her, good luck with that. But coming up from behind, letting the current be a little bit of insulation and protection from the noise and the vibration that you're making is going to put that in your favor. So motoring upstream is a big deal. So with the tri-track, what you would do is you would end up vacating these bases and go to more of like a Select steering or something like that, in which case you're probably going to lose the use of your tracks because you're not going to have your foot pedals here and your rod stagers and your rods. But again, that gives you the ability to flip them to the outside if you're using a motor, or flip them to the back. Because another thing I noticed right out of the gate is if you wanted to, and especially if you're using this track for a steering bar, is you could just place this the opposite direction, put yourself another stager there, and as long as you're not sticking way out behind the boat, you've got the ability to put your rods right where you want them, but they're inside the hole, they're not catching on tree branches. And so you could just take that second stager, move it right here, and you could basically have 3 rods mounted horizontal on each side. That's 6 rods, that's plenty for river fishing. And just again, you can configure and reconfigure and reconfigure this thing. And this new speed clip, or what's it called? Quick clip?
We call it quick clip.
Quick clip.
Essentially, you get 2 of these with the boat, plus the mount of the quick clip and the L brackets, so that you can have that versatility. But we also sell these as an accessory that you can add to any boat. But the idea of what you're saying, if you wanted to do 6 rods, doing it that way, you could buy these in a pair. We sell them in a pair as an accessory, and then do what you're saying by just adding those to the boat. The other thing, just to talk about the rods and why we went inside, the last 2 Coosas, especially the Coosa HD, had the kind of, I always call them the rod tusk. They had the little rod tip protectors on the outside, but it still always left your reels and rods kind of laying on top of the boat, more to the outside of the boat. And as you know, river fishing, like, you're getting through rocks, you're getting under trees, around trees. And that was one of the biggest asks from our team that we put together for this boat, was to figure out a way to get the rods inside the cockpit instead of having them laying on the outside of the boat or strapped to the outside of the boat.
And one of the cool things about the way they did this seat setup is you've got the nice little cutout shallow, frame, instead of running this all the way across there, so that if you do adjust your seat forward and back, you're not interfering with your rear handles. So that was very well thought out, so that instead of taking the easy route and just running this bracket all the way down, you've got that cut out, so it makes it easier to get your reels, especially spinning reels that have a little bit, more handle that sticks off a little further to the inside. Again, though, having the ability to have that naked space, I could really see some hardcore river fishermen just dropping these stages all together and just laying the reels in there with the rods. And if you did that, you could probably even get 2, maybe even sometimes 3 rods into the same hole. So you could get, 3 or 4 rods on one side. All right, guys, so moving on back, we're going to talk about the back of the cockpit and the Tankwell kind of all together. And the reason for that is, not only did Jackson put the tri-track, longitudinally on the boat, they did put this one piece, across here, which does a couple things. One, it creates you a grab bar right there for moving the boat, for pulling it up over a beaver dam, for doing whatever you need to do. It gives you another place to mount accessories, and it also stiffens the boat up by having that bar go across there. What we did is we threw one of these quick clips on there real fast, just to show that you could configure and reconfigure this Jackson multi-box in this direction. You could put it this way. This actually, by accident, lines up perfectly with the back of the Yak Attack Gridlock series, or maybe it's on purpose because that's how Yak Attack works.
Could be.
But you can actually just take these brackets and mount them to the back of your black pack. So if you wanted to connect that to the back of the front or side of the black pack, you could do that with this new Jackson multi-box. It's just a real simple box. Got some tool holders on it, some pliers holders. It's just an open, empty box. We've got a few tools in here. It's got a bungee, connector if you want to pull it over the top. It's got little individual bungee lockers right there. Just a real cool little tool and accessory box. And again, with these easy to remove, quick clips, you just basically pop this thing off. That way, if you've got valuables inside there, you take it, you throw it in your truck. When you get ready to set up for fishing the next day, you just drop it in, and you just drop it in and lock it in place. Now, just like we talked about up front, I've got this mounted with the little L bracket, so that way you can change position and distance and all that. But in theory, you could just go with the direct mount to the inside of the track, and you wouldn't necessarily have to do that. So it just gives you a ton of versatility. So one of the first accessories I would consider picking up is this new Jackson multi-box. I think it's going to work great with all your other Yak Attack accessories. It's going to interlock. It's going to be just a cool way to have a little bit of extra storage. But if you don't want to do that, you just got this open Tankwell. You've got this bar up here that allows you to connect, tie downs or fittings. They didn't bungee up the Tankwell because, again, they left you pass-throughs for straps. You can put bungee on there if you want to. You can go with standard straps if you want to. In a couple of the initial review videos, I saw like Chris Funk put a bungee cord through here with the Omni hooks on there, so it locks directly into the corner of the black pack. But you don't have to have the bungee to where you've got to fight it. You just take each one and connect it directly to the black pack. That'll probably be, what I end up doing, especially once I figure out exactly what I want to do, with the multi-box. And then coming on back to the back, the standard, Coosa traditional double, drag anchor. So if you've got your line run through on one side for the front, you can run your drag anchor off of the back. You can set up another anchor wizard either on the back track or the front track. Because honestly, if you're going to anchor from behind, you're probably, in my opinion, using that more as a stabilization anchor than you are primary anchor. I'm probably never going to anchor downstream from behind as my primary anchor. But there's a lot of times if I pull up into a pocket or a cove and I drop that front anchor and I let out a little slack and I don't want to swing, I can drop that back anchor and it'll hold me in place nicely, and drag anchors work perfect for that. Also love the fact that you guys put the rear access hatch, so if you get in to start trying to rig for a motor, doing some of that other stuff, you have that rear access. And again, the drain plugs being as far back to the back of the boat. I don't know why it took us so long in this industry to stop putting drain plugs, 6 inches forward to the end of the boat. So when you start trying to stand it up, you can't get that last little bit of water out. So kudos to you guys for putting that drain plug on the top. But if you flip it over and stand it up, it's like you can get pretty much every last drop of water out of there. So Jameson, what did I miss? Talk to me about anything else that I might have missed on the boat from an overview standpoint. Then we'll pull these rods off of there. We'll flip it upside down and we'll jump into the hole.
I mean, I think you covered it for the most part, Chad. The only thing I would say we do have, just like all of our other fishing kayaks, we have the power pole. These are inserts, so you don't have to through bolt or drill anything. It's already there for that power pole bracket. It also works now on all the motor brackets like Torpedo. So it makes it really easy to rig that motor or rig those electronics. A couple pad eyes just to help with line. But yeah, the only other thing, and we can jump back to the cockpit real quick. This is kind of a new geometry for us at Jackson. We wanted the floor again to be just super rigid and super solid, but also keep the water dumping out of the boat quickly and everything. So we kind of actually went in, and after we prototyped it, we, instead of taking the floor down, we raised the middle of the floor up, and that gets all that kind of deeper channel, but it adds a lot of structure and rigidity to this area of the boat. So when you stand on it, you don't get any of that flexing or pooling of water, which has happened before with other boats. So it adds a lot of strength, but it also helps channel that water out. And like you said about installing that tube, that is available as an accessory kit for the anchor pass-through on the bow, as far as that goes, and that comes with the drill bit that you need. So there's no thinking involved. It comes with the right size tube and the right size.
Oh, there's no redneckery involved?
Yeah, you can just take it out and just put it in there.
You don't over-drill the hole or
not
under-drill the hole, so you take the guesswork out.
So we tried to make it as easy as possible.
I thought it might have been an optical illusion, so I'm glad you pointed it out, that the deck was popped up like that. And I was going to wait until I got on the water to truly assess that. But really what it looks like to me, now that you mentioned it, is the way highway design works. It's crowned in the middle so that the water runs off to both sides, and that also gives it that rise in the center, so that if you did happen to be a bigger dude to flex it a little bit, even if you flex it, you're only loading it, you're not flexing it, which again is going to help with that water not standing in the middle or pooling when the boat saddles. So basically the pre-rise, and it looks like it's also tapered, to the front and to the back. And it sounds like that was done on purpose. So when we flip it over and we start talking about how the scuppers are designed, why they're designed the way that they're designed, and then these bigger, deeper channels, we'll get a little bit more into that once we flip the boat over. So let's take some of these accessories off of here just so we can flip the boat over, and let's take a look at the hull. All right, guys, so listen, one of the things that we're trying to do a lot more of when we do these fishing kayak reviews is jump into the actual design of the hull and what the purpose behind it was. So I'll give you my quick initial impression, and then I'm actually going to turn it over to Jameson to let him tell you about like what really went into the thought process behind the boat. Obviously, the boat's got a more of a rounded, somewhat of a tri-hull, but not really, because all the pontoons are kind of level. So you're going to get that center is going to be a little bit deeper. It's going to give you that more loose ability to move. But as it's rounded over and you run into this first chine, that's going to allow you to edge. And when you edge and you hit that first chine, that's going to give you that first real sticking point. And then as you come up the boat, as long as it's going out, the more of that boat you push into the water, the more secondary stability you get. Just imagine like when you're a kid and you try to push a basketball into the water, the more basketball it gets in there, the harder it gets. Same kind of concept, you know, with a boat like this. Now, they went away from the really upswept nose on the original Coosa to more of a little bit, you know, more streamlined nose. The scuppers are obviously across the industry have advanced, but with Jackson's like, you know, history in whitewater and understanding how water flow works and bringing, you know, stuff down through a hole, obviously whitewater kayaks don't have scuppers. So there's always been like a whitewater culture at Jackson Kayak because Jackson Kayak started as a whitewater company. So, you know, in the early days with EJ getting out and testing a lot of these boats, they still had that whitewater design and that leaning towards whitewater, maybe a little bit too much in the beginning. And now we're kind of coming back to the middle where you've got the stability, the comfort, the riggability, the capacity, and all those things for guys that are on my end and your end of the spectrum.
Right.
And so, Jameson, I'm just going to stop talking there and let you just kind of talk through the idea behind the hull.
Yeah, so you kind of touched on it. You know, Jackson's history is in making good paddling boats, good hull shapes for moving water especially. And the original Coosa was a very maneuverable boat, and I used to call it my creaking boat, because when I wanted to go like super nimble in a very small body of water or small moving water, you could just get that thing in anywhere. Coosa HD kind of went a lot further towards a better tracking hull shape and was able to handle, you know, more open water a lot better, but it sacrificed some of that maneuverability. So even though this is a wider boat and a bigger platform, one of the key things we wanted to dial in on was how do we get somewhere in between that? You know, a boat that is still very, very maneuverable when you want it to be, but able to handle the gear and the new accessories and just the modern kayak angler and what they bring with them and what they want to do with their boat, but not sacrifice that performance. And I think that's where we always do really well is hull performance. We always start with that first and then figure out how to get our decks to work with the hull performance. This boat was kind of a blend of that. We kind of worked it from both ways at the same time, from a deck standpoint and a layout and what we wanted feature-wise, but also what we wanted from the hull side of the boat. So it's a good blend of that primary, secondary stability together. You know, it's not going to have a whole lot of one and not a lot of the other. We tried to blend those as much as possible and still give you all the features that you want on the top side of the boat. But this is where it all starts. And once you get into kayak fishing, if you're not a kayaker, you eventually at some point start becoming a kayaker, and you'll understand that hull shape is super important in maximizing your day out on the water.
You know, one thing we did before we started filming is pop this cover off so you could see, you know, exactly how big, you know, this transducer scupper is, so that you can fit even your side scan and your 3-in-1 and your larger transducers from pretty much all the manufacturers. But then you've also got that cover to throw back on there. And I like the fact that the transducer was moved a little further back in the boat, so it's not up at the front where it's the first thing to hit rocks and the first thing to hit bottom, so that you're going to beat your transducer up over time. So that was, you know, really smart. Now, one thing that I'm going to point out, and again, I really don't like to get into performance until we're doing the on the water thing, but I've got a lot of experience in these boats and a lot of experience in hull design and things like that. So I can just tell you, even from just seeing this boat before I ever get it on the water, and this is something that's super important to a big dude, and for all you big dudes out there listening, this wide flat hull is going to get you one of, if not the most shallow draft setups in a riverboat. And most of us have had to do the scoot and pull to get through sections of a river. So the shallower that you can float and the skinnier the water that you can get into, the less you're going to have to get out and drag. but that's also going to give you access to waters that may not be river waters.
Right.
If you want to, use this as your jump boat to get into those backwater, flooded duck areas. If you want to use it for saltwater fishing where you've got to worry about getting out of super skinny water at low tide, just looking at this hole right out of the gate, I can tell that it is going to float super shallow, which is going to be a big bonus if you either carry a lot of gear or if you happen to be, on the bigger end of the spectrum like I am. And then last but not least, and we'll finish this up, the sacrificial keel. I'm partial to this because this is one of my contributions to the kayak fishing industry. I was the first person to push this. It then became the industry standard. And there's been a few manufacturers over the last few years that have gotten away from it. And I'm just like, you just cannot not do the sacrificial keel on boats that you're going to drag. You're going to ultimately drag through the hole. So I love the fact that Jackson really stiffened this up right here. You got this stiff column in the back to give it that extra stiffness, and then put that sacrificial keel on there so you do not have to worry. The big oversized back handle is huge too, because a lot of people don't realize this, but most river access is vertical. Okay, and I see people all the time lowering their river boats in by the front handle or they're in front of it. You want to let boats go to the river with you behind them. So putting a drag strap or something through this big oversized beefy handle in the back, using the handle or the rope from behind and letting that boat go ahead of you is how you want to access a river. So I was really happy to see that in this design there was a big, made in, handle in the back, but I like the fact that you didn't do it in the front because it usually adds a little bit extra length, and it's usually flimsier in the front, and it can crack, and it makes it harder to mount things like bow mounted trolling motors and power poles to the front and things like that. So perfect combination in my opinion. So guys, there you have it. That's our initial walkthrough of the Jackson Coosa X. I'll actually link up to Jameson and Chris Funk, the Feral Ones videos of their initial walkthrough, just in case there was anything else that I missed. And big shout out to Chris Funk, the Feral One, for by far doing the best reviews on this boat so far, and some of the footage that we actually cut to for action on this boat in this video was courtesy of him. So big shout out to Chris Funk. I'll put the link to his channel in the description box below. Funny dude, wealth of knowledge, one of the OGs of kayak fishing, so go check him out as well. But
sure.
Jameson, man, thanks. Let's now get this thing on the trailer and go head to the water. Actually, we got one more thing for you guys. Thanks to Jameson pointing it out as we're flipping the boat over. He's like, we want to cover specs and price and weight and all that kind of stuff? I'm like, oh, duh. That's literally the number one thing I overlook, and the number one question co-heads always ask. So Jameson, talk to us about length, width, weight, and then price. I think that's probably the main 4 questions.
Yeah.
So how long and how wide is the boat?
So it's 36 inches wide, 11 foot, 8 inches long. It's 98 pounds, has a capacity of 425 pounds, and it's $18.99.
So $18.99, 36 inches wide. So far in the world of riverboats, this is the widest in the new offerings. Right there in the same weight, maybe a little bit heavier. And I think a lot of times manufacturers like to go heavy in the beginning. So I'm sure that as this boat gets a little more dialed in, it may even shed a few pounds, but still not. And here's the other thing. 98 pounds is going to sound heavy until you realize that it's 98 true pounds. Because there's a lot of manufacturers that advertise the weight of the boat, unfitted, the hull.
Yeah, that's everything on it.
No hatches, no tracks, no seat, none of that. So that 98 pounds is a true weight, right? That's
with the seat,
included,
everything.
the seat, all the hardware, hatches, everything.
Yep, that's the whole total.
98 true pounds. And then what was the price one more time?
$18.99.
$18.99.
Let me verify that though. Because we tried to get it lower than that. Can you just keep this in? You guys can check it out at JacksonKayak.com.
It's not like he's the brand manager.
I got a lot of stuff.
He's the brand manager, not the sales manager.
I had it right.
Was it right?
Yeah, it was
okay, cool. $18.99. That's $1,899 for you guys out there that go, that's not bad for under $20. Anyway, we'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks, brother.
Yeah, thank you.